There's one thing I'd encourage you not to wait until the first week of school to figure out: how you're going to keep track of student accommodations. Because by the time school starts, you won't have time to dig for that information, and some of your students can't afford for it to get lost. Welcome to the Secondary Teacher Podcast, the podcast for middle and high school teachers juggling multiple preps to get the strategies to reduce overwhelm so that you don't have to choose between being an effective teacher and prioritizing important relationships. I'm your host, Khristen Massic, a 10-year high school engineering teacher, former middle school assistant principal, and teacher coach. Every week, we will discuss strategies, systems, and time-saving tips to help you not only survive but thrive as a multiple prep teacher. We've been talking about the first week of school, discussion routines, learning surveys, syllabi, community building. Today, we're going somewhere a little different because one of the most important things you can do before students arrive isn't about activities or culture building at all. It's about making sure you actually know who's walking into your classroom and what they need from you. It was probably my 6th year of teaching, second semester, and one of the other teachers in the building came up to me and said something like, "So are you printing everything on blue paper for him?" And I just looked at him. "What are you talking about?" That one of the students in my class had an accommodation, a visual processing support, that meant printed materials on blue paper were significantly easier for him to read. And all year, I had been handing the student white paper for the entire semester. I felt terrible, not because I didn't care, but because I genuinely didn't know. Here's what had happened. I was teaching at our district's tech center, which meant students came from their boundary schools, their home high schools, and the accommodation files were supposed to follow them, but somewhere in that transfer, the paperwork didn't make it to me. And that student never said anything, which, if you've ever worked with teenagers, makes complete sense. Nobody wants to be the kid who needs something different. Nobody wants to draw that kind of attention to themselves. And here's what made it worse when I thought about it afterward. I could have printed everything on blue paper for everyone. It wouldn't have been a burden. It wouldn't have changed anything for the other students. It was a simple thing that would have made a real difference for one student, and I didn't do it because I didn't know to do it. That moment stayed with me for a long time, and it completely changed how I approached accommodation tracking from that point forward. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about student accommodations is that they're something you remember. They're not. They shouldn't depend on memory at all. They should depend on a system, because the goal isn't to memorize every accommodation for every student across every class period. The goal is to have one place where you can find what you need when you're planning a lesson, when you're forming groups, when a student is struggling and you're trying to figure out why. That's what frees up your brain to actually teach. Here's the practical reality that makes this harder than it should be. Finding accommodation information in most student information systems requires digging. In my district's SIS, and my husband teaches in the same district, so I hear about this regularly, you can't see at a glance which students have an IEP or 504s just by pulling up your roll. You have to actually dig in to your roster, which is not the place that you pull up every single day. From that gradebook or attendance view, you have to click on each individual student, 3 clicks minimum, to find out if there's even a flag. And if you're in the middle of class period with students in front of you, you're not stopping to click through 3 screens to check to see whether or not even has an accommodation. It's just not happening. But during teacher prep days, those first few days before school really gets going, before the grading starts and the content gets heavy, you have time to do that digging and to capture what you find in one place while you have that time. That way you don't have to dig again. That's the whole idea. Eventually, I built a tracker, one place, every class period at a glance. Who has an IEP, who has a 504, who is a multilingual learner, any accommodations for or notes I wanted to remember, and this is the part I think matters most: any follow-up questions. Because sometimes a student is flagged in the system, but the details are incomplete. Sometimes the paperwork hasn't arrived yet, especially if you're teaching a location other than the main school, like the tech center, or a specialized program where students are coming from multiple boundary schools. Sometimes you just want to check in with a file holder before you assume you have the full picture. The tracker doesn't replace those conversations. It makes sure you don't forget to have them. When you get your class rosters, here are 3 things worth doing before students arrive. 1. Read through the accommodations, not to memorize them, just to become familiar with who's in your classroom. You're looking for patterns, supports, or anything that might shape how you launch the first few weeks. 2. Write down your follow-up questions. Don't assume the paperwork tells the whole story. Maybe you need clarification. Maybe a student is mid-evaluation. Maybe the files haven't transferred yet from their previous school. Capture the question while you're thinking about it, before school starts and the questions get buried under everything else. 3. Put everything in one place. The fewer places you have to check, the more likely you are to actually use the information. Good systems reduce searching. And every minute you're not hunting for information is a minute you can spend actually supporting students. I also want to say something important before we move on. You're not going to know everything about every student before the first day, and you shouldn't expect yourself to. The first few weeks are about learning. You're learning your students, they're learning you, and your system is there to make sure the important things don't slip through the cracks while you're managing everything else. A tracker doesn't make you a perfect teacher. It makes sure a student doesn't spend an entire semester on white paper when blue paper would have helped. That's enough. I think about that student a lot. The one who never said anything. The one who just quietly struggled through an entire semester without the support he was supposed to have. Not because anyone failed him intentionally, but because the information got lost somewhere between his homeschool and my classroom, and nobody had a system to catch it. He deserved better than that. And the hard truth is, so do a lot of students sitting in classrooms right now whose teachers are doing their best, but don't have a way to keep track of what those students actually need. A simple tracker doesn't solve every problem, but it closes that gap. And closing that gap matters. Next episode, we're talking about something that comes up every single year for secondary teachers who care about their students. How do you actually build relationships with students when you're managing multiple preps, mixed grade levels, and a room full of teenagers who aren't always sure they want to be there? It's not as complicated as it sounds, and it might be the most important thing you do for the first 2 weeks. Now, coming back to the accommodations, the tool that helped me most with this is my IEP 504 and multilingual learner accommodations tracker. It's an edible spreadsheet that gives you one place to organize accommodations, notes, and follow-up reminders, so you're not bouncing between your student information systems, emails, and handwritten notes when you need to find something quickly. It's included inside the Secondary Teacher Systems Toolkit, along with 8 other classroom systems designed to help your year run more smoothly from day one. And if this is the one resource you need right now, it's also available individually in my Teachers Pay Teacher store. Both links are in the show notes. Before you go, one question. What information are you expecting yourself to remember that could be captured in a simple system instead? Because supporting students shouldn't depend on having a perfect memory. It should depend on having a system you can trust. Finish something that makes tomorrow lighter. I'll see you next time.